Hey, footy fans, welcome to the Point of Difference Rugby League podcast. I'm your host, Dave, and today we're going back in the day with one of the great Indigenous players of the 90s. He was one of my favourite players when I was a kid, especially when it came to the Warriors. It's the one and only John Simon. How are you, man?
I'm good, Dave. How are you?
Mate, it's so good to have you on the show. Thank you so much for coming on. So what are you doing with yourself, man? What are you doing these days and whereabouts are you living?
Well, obviously, I'm living down here in Kiama Downs. I've got my Subway franchise, which I've had for in probably a couple of weeks, about 3 weeks, I think.
Oh, really?
Mid June, sorry. Had for 20 years.
Wow.
And also the shameless plug in the background. Got my not for profit, which my wife and I and my brother and uh, my wife's daughter set up.
Yep.
Australian Aboriginal Child and Family Services, which we're working primarily with high needs children in care.
Okay.
So uh, we've been doing that we've had that for just over 3 years, but the main work, obviously, we had to do a lot of accreditation and everything. That we've only sort of really been providing services for the just under 6 months now. So uh, that's it's something close to my heart because I did, prior to this, the last 15 years, I've worked for Department of Communities and Justice, which was with, well, I don't know, people like that, docs or they're not DCJ, just basically in that field. They obviously work across a variety of different programs across that space. I was working there for 15 years and saw that there's definitely a need for what we set up. There was a big gap, and that's basically what I set up. Took a little bit of while, obviously, a lot of support there with, obviously being a not-for-profit. There's lots of boxes we've got to tick, so making sure we did that. Also, just got back in the coaching rugby league as well. My junior club, Port Kembla, they hadn't had an under-18 side for, I think, at least 6 years now. And they've been trying to get one, and have sort of got the opportunity. I hadn't coached for a couple of years, and I just saw it when I was visiting my daughter over in London last year, and I thought, I wouldn't mind doing that. I thought it'd be a good thing to try and get Port back on the map, because I hadn't had an under-18s or a senior side for around 6 or 7 years now. So sort of thought, oh yeah, I might do that. And when I contacted the guys and sort of said, oh, I could be interested, they basically said, oh, when do you start? No, when do you want to start, sort of
Well,
thing. So it was pretty good.
Done it for sure.
It's been pretty hard, obviously. We've got a side this year, which is really pleasing. We're not strong, obviously. How the age groups work, they've got two levels of under 18s sides in the competition we're in the bottom side.
Right.
But to be fair, it's probably the best competition we could be playing in for where we're at. So it's been a really positive experience so far, except for the wet weather, which washed out two of the games in 2 weeks in a row. But there's that. Also, as I said, living down here on the south coast, sandwich harvesting, and I'm sort of keeping myself busy.
Yep. Oh, it's brilliant, man. It's that's fantastic that you got into coaching, and who knew that there'd be rain washing out rugby league games in Australia? Like it's always hot as.
I'd like to think I'd like it hotter personally, but it's
Really? Oh, you wouldn't want to live in Christchurch then.
no.
No. So, I just wanted to say I'll give a quick shout out to Troy Warner from the Paracave podcast. He wanted to say hello. I know you've been on his podcast before. He's an absolute champion. So, yeah, just want to say hello to you.
Oh, Troy, yes, you actually wished me a happy birthday for yesterday. So,
Good stuff.
like yourself and many others, and yeah, I sort of try not to celebrate it too much. I'm getting the numbers keep getting higher, as like us all, but I'm sort of in
Mate,
denial a little bit about it. So
Yeah, man, I'm 40 this year. I'm dreading it. Never mind. Right, so let's go backwards in time. Let's rewind the clock. Where did you grow up? What was life like for a young John Simon?
Oh, I think it's pretty good. Obviously, grew up with my brothers, Craig and Mark. Craig obviously played NRL. Mark ended up playing lower grades and won a reserve grade competition. Uh, actually, the year I retired, 2001, with the St George Illawarra. Uh, had a little bit of time at Canberra, but didn't actually get an opportunity to play NRL. But uh, obviously, we grew up in Dapto, Coonawarra.
Yep.
Yeah, not far from one of your previous guests, Tony Delaceres.
Oh, legend.
Actually went to
Legend.
school with Tony. Obviously, I think he might have mentioned it as well.
Yep.
So I think I've known Tony since I was probably 6 or 7 years old, from
All right.
virtually kindergarten up until we left school. And uh, yeah, obviously my dad played football, so obviously that's uh, probably where I got my sort of first introduction into rugby league.
Okay. Right. So, did you enjoy playing it right from the get-go? Was that just something you naturally progressed in?
Oh, I think I probably loved it. That's probably the soft word for it, really. I think as from, and obviously stories my mum tells me, and obviously back when my dad was alive, um, as soon as I could walk and sort of run and call it football, I that's what I did. Like I
Right.
said, Dad played. He was a bit of a Port Kembla local legend, and obviously I'd go and you know up play up footy up and down the hill, watch probably all my childhood. Up
Yep.
until I had an opportunity to play. I think I started under sevens, so I think
Okay.
1979 Dapto, and and just kept going.
Right. So, did you progress through all the grades at Dapto? And sort of like where did your representative footy come in? Like sort of during your teens, or which clubs did you play for on your path to first grade?
Well, obviously it started off with Dapto, and I think funnily enough, we were undefeated for 5 years, and but there's a lot
Wow.
of um, there was a lot of infighting with in particularly that last year in under 11s, and um, it wasn't really that enjoyable, even though we were winning games, junior
Okay.
football for it. So I ended up leaving Dapto after the fifth time we under 11s we won the grand final, and I went to another club to Berkeley, and myself and I think two other mates from Dapto, we left and went to Berkeley, and
Right.
we played there for a couple of years. Again, funnily enough, we made the final the first year, and then made the grand final the year after,
Yeah.
and then in under 13s, and then we couldn't get a side in under 14s. So then I moved across to Port Kembla. So
Right.
um, yeah, so which sort of I didn't really want to go back to Dapto, even though I think everything sort of settled down around that. But having moved on, I thought I was quite keen to go across to Port Kembla. Obviously, primarily because Dad played a lot of football
Okay.
there. Um, and from there on, like we just sort of moved on from there. Rep footy wise, I think under nines they sort of had a rep team. They started back then, and we used to play uh, Tamworth every year. They used to have a sort of 1 year we'd go to Tamworth, the next year they'd come down here. So um, that deal going on. We did that, and that sort of was the start of the representative football
Right.
for myself. Around that time, obviously, too, it was a big thing as well because the Steelers came into well, back then, the New South Wales Rugby League Premiership. So
Yep.
it sort of made things a little bit more clearer and probably in a lot of people's minds, particularly from juniors from the Illawarra, achievable. Well, it seemed like more
Yeah.
achievable to potentially play rugby league at the elite level. So that sort of helped give you the sort of the kickstart. And obviously, if you love the sport, and you know that there's an opportunity potentially as you get older to potentially, hopefully, ever achieve your goal of playing NRL. But, and without having to leave home, well,
Yeah, man.
you sort of think, oh yeah, how good's that? So yeah, that's what ended up happening for myself and like many others. I was obviously played with David Ida, Ryan Girdler, Johnny Cross, another one, Shane Wilson. We all
Paul
played.
McGregor.
Yeah, well, Mary grew up around the corner from me as well.
Really?
But he's a little bit older than me. I won't dob him around his age, but he is a little bit older than me. But obviously coming through and obviously yes, with those sort of guys, you sort of think, oh yeah, I can do this. If I play well and if opportunity comes your way. So.
Yeah. So did you always play in the halves coming through the grades?
Not really. I played a lot of different positions. I
Okay.
think obviously going back to obviously when I first started, I think under 10, under 7. Sorry, I started off as a second rower, but
Really?
well, funnily enough, well, I think my age group was the last age group that played full field, 13 aside, all the way through. So
Okay.
I know my brother's age group; he's a year younger than me. I think they started off 13 aside their first year, but then they went to mod league under eights, I think it was, or mini league or whatever. I think they might have just had mod league back that day. But my team, so I was a back rower that first year, and then under eights, under nines, I sort of moved from sort of the back row to lock.
Yep.
5'8", I sort of would interchange, and because back in the day, Dad was a lock, so it was sort of like, oh, I want to do the same as my dad, sort of thing as well. But so then I went there, and then obviously as I got a little bit older, then I sort of moved out to sort of the 5'8" role.
Okay.
Until I didn't really play a lot of halfback until I got to NRL. So
Right.
it was sort of like, oh well, you can play halfback. It was
Okay.
sort of
So,
a good spot for me to sort of fit into the side, and it was sort of not that these days there's not a lot of difference between your half and your 5'8" roles, but sort of back then there was a little bit of difference. But at the same time too, without trying to bore everybody, you sort of there was sort of like, well, if you can play 5'8", you can play halfback, sort of thing. It's just
yeah.
you just sort of adjust to what what the sort of role was. So that was sort of what
Okay.
happened for me.
So what about the physicality then? Like being a half for the most of your career, but starting in the back row. Did you like folding guys in half, or was it more of a stay away from all the contact?
I think I was sort of lucky. My dad was a really good tackler, so
Yeah.
obviously learning under him, and we never had any sort of issues with the tackle technique. Even coming through when I was a young kid, he'd sort of, you're ducking your head too soon, or
Okay.
and then obviously too when a lot of other kids were growing, I wasn't growing as much, so obviously
True.
that sort of helped guide my migration from back row to lock, and then around under 14s, I moved to hooker. So
Really?
so I played a couple of years of hooker there, and before, and I almost quit when I was sort of 15 because at that time the age groups down here, my age group had to play a year up, and I wasn't big, and all of a sudden, I was like, oh geez, I still hadn't grown really. All of a sudden I'm going to have to play these guys that are a year older than me, but they're, compared to me, massive. And so I was like, I'm sort of not embarrassed enough to say, well, I was scared. So
No, mate,
that
I
was
would
my
have been.
biggest thing. And then, funnily enough, my club ended up talking me into playing.
Yeah.
And I sort of said, oh, look, I'll play, but I don't want to play hooker. I want to play 5'8". And
Right.
then from that point on, it was sort of like, well, I ended up getting player of the year for that whole age group. So,
NRL.
which, sort of going from not playing at all to getting player of the year was sort of like, that sort of was a bit of the confidence boost that I needed. And I grew a little bit. I didn't grow as much as to what I'm, obviously a big fat porker that I am now. But I did grow enough to sort of help me maintain my confidence into the next year. So, because then, funnily enough, the next year after that, they adjusted all the age groups back to how they used to be, which meant I had to play a year up again. So, having done that the year before and got player of the year, obviously there was no thought of not playing after that. So, that was sort of the big thing. And obviously too, playing in a good side. Obviously had, in my junior side, I had, guys like Johnny Cross and a few other guys. And in our age group as well, and at Collies, there was Dave Riolo, Ryan Girdler. So there was a good competition, for our age group back then. So as much as I'd like to say we won the comp, we didn't end up winning it. But we made the grand finals because. But nice. We're playing against good players and good sides. So certainly did that. But at the same time too, we would all form together, particularly the back end before I ended up grade, playing SG Ball and Harold Matthews, which we ended up winning both competitions.
Oh, nice.
Which was really exciting, and helped provide that stepping stone for the guys like the names I've mentioned, for us to sort of come into grade, sort of all at the same time nearly. So it was certainly a confidence boost for everyone, because obviously you're coming through with guys that you've played with, and been successful with. So that for us was really sort of and fortunate that the club sort of hoped that was sort of the catalyst for them to get to where they wanted to do. And fortunately enough, obviously early on in my career, and obviously 1990, 91, 92, obviously our first finals series in 1992.
Man.
We sort of formed the nucleus with guys like a couple of years older, as Brett Rodwell and Dean Stabilities, and and obviously this is the back end, as you mentioned, Mary. So
Rod
Mary decided to leave Dapto and come in and join us in town. So,
so good.
The rest is history for him.
Okay. What about when you signed for Illawarra, like proper for first grade, 1990 season? You're 17 years old. You're walking into first grade for the first time. Like, what does it go through your mind? When you're walking in, only 17 years old, about to take on the big boys in the NRL. Like, that's pretty full on.
Yeah. Well, funnily enough, I wasn't actually going to play.
Okay.
And the only reason I ended up playing grade football was because at the time I was about to do my HSC, so I was still in high school. So about to do my HSC, and I was doing the highest level maths and physics and whatnot. And the only reason why I thought of grade as an option was because it meant I would have one extra day to not train or play during the week, because back in those days, if you played juniors, we'd play rep football on the Saturday, then back up and play our junior club football on the Sunday, and then you're training 4 days during the week, and obviously other stuff with obviously with junior reps and things like that. So playing grade football for me meant obviously I could get an extra day to do my studies, which I probably ended up not doing anyway. But yeah, that was sort of the catalyst for me. The club obviously were confident in my ability to actually handle grade. Like us all coming through, and unfortunately, obviously myself and Dave Riolo, we played the last trial, and then next thing you know, they played. Back then they had the sevens competition before the season started, and that was myself and Dave got picked for that. So that was sort of one. It was really exciting because obviously I was at school, I didn't know, and then all of a sudden I get a phone call. I had to go to the front office. I thought, well, I haven't done anything wrong. And it was the newspaper wanted to come out and, because I'd just been named in the sevens squad. So they wanted to come out and take a photo, all that sort of stuff. And so there was that. And with that too, obviously, months before, I was sort of like, watching NRL and, funny enough, I was watching Balmain because I was a massive Balmain supporter as a kid.
Right.
And then playing the Steelers in at Wynn Stadium. And they're watching the guys, Blocker and Paul Siren and all that. Oh, Jesus, if they were running at me, I'd jump out of the way type thing. And our first game in that sevens competition was against Balmain, and my first tackle was Paul Siren. So,
mate.
so it's sort of like, but when you get out there, like I said, I was 70 kilos when I first started, 17 years of age. Like I said, really exciting. You sort of pinch yourself, okay, well, how good is this? But at the same time too, you sort of, when you're training or pre-season, that sort of stuff, with guys like, Rob Wishart and that sort of stuff, it sort of had come into the grade, and they had that successful Panasonic Cup, even though they didn't play so well during the Winfield Cup those days. That Panasonic Cup, that was sort of like kept the buzz in Illawarra and Wollongong around rugby league. And obviously being a junior, we won junior reps, and that was sort of it was just good to say, like I said, playing with these guys that have played NRL, or training with these guys that play NRL, it's sort of like, you sort of, how close you are, and then before you know it, to get that opportunity, it was, like I said, really exciting. Obviously, at school, your mates at school, oh, how cool, Johnny, like so. But
man.
What's it like? They're always really supportive. There was none of the sort of peer pressure. Oh, come and do this, come and do that. They understood. So there was none of that sort of pressure.
Right. Were you shy, like when you made your debut, or for those first few games, like being a half, having to bark the team around? You've got these like legends and older players all around you, and you've got to run the show. Like, were you confident with that?
Yeah, well, fortunately for me, I come in at 5'8", so the halfback that was there was a little Trevor Kissel and Dougie Delaney as well, and they're both in those roles. They were a little bit more experienced, and I come in as a 5'8" initially, and then after probably half a dozen games, then I think it might have been through injury that they sort of pushed me to halfback and brought someone else to come and play 5'8". But it's certainly fortunately enough, like Ronnie Hildy was head coach back then, but he sort of had decided to take a step back and not coach the next year. And the club appointed Graham Murray, and Muzzer had been assistant coach in 1990. So he was a great help, obviously, throughout that year. And obviously when I moved to halfback, just sort of helping me say, well, this is what you want. And at the same time too, when you're out there on the field and you're not doing it, you got the experienced guys saying, John, you got to talk, you got to tell us, because I was really lucky because Chris Walsh, who was captain at the time, he actually played with my dad. So when he was 18, so he played. He's a Port junior himself, and he played sort of first grade with Port Kembla with dad back. I think I went when I was 7 or 8 years old. So so I was confident enough to give him stick about that, but at the same time too, I was having guys like that. I was really lucky in that sense because there was that sort of connection. Obviously, Muzzer there as well to help guide as well. And while she's sort of saying, Johnny, like, this is what you got to do. We're not going to get cranky at you if you're getting up us for not doing our job. So so that sort of had a lot of support there. That sort of helped me develop in my role. And to be fair, it took me a little while.
Brilliant, man. Yeah, I guess it would, eh? When you're so young and you've got to bark around orders to these old fellas. But you made your debut off the bench, round one, 1990. As far as my research goes, it was against Canberra, the Green Machine. So how did you find out you were making your debut? You know, what are your memories of coming up against the double-decker bus that's Mal Meninga and his army? Like, he's huge.
Well, yes, actually, it was. I played 21s. Actually, I played reserve grade that day, so and played well, pretty much most of the game, and then I sat on the bench for first grade because,
Right.
as we know, back in those days there was no top 17, so to speak.
Yep.
Each week you play lower grades, and they ask half a dozen players to come sit on the bench, and I'm obviously one of those players. Which the week before I did with against the Roosters in round one, but I didn't actually get on. So
Right.
I was like, well, I was a bit disappointed, but the club, we won. I think they won round one, which was really, really good. And but I remember sitting on there, and then all of a sudden, I think there was about 22 minutes to go in the game, and they go, Johnny, you're on. Okay. So you get out there, all of a sudden, I was sitting there okay, and then all of a sudden you get all these nerves in your stomach, and like I said, I'm this 17-year-old, skinny little 17-year-old kid, and they're out there. And back then, you could make subs during the scrums. So obviously, I remember, Ricky Stewart's kicked the ball out down, and all of a sudden, the scrums, Touchy's put his flag up, and they're like, yep, get out there, and all of a sudden, I'm out there. And I remember basically, I come out there, I'm 5'8", and I looked up, and there's Laurie Daly, and then Mal Meninga, Gary Belcher.
Can I go off?
Oh, well, when you sort of go and you sort of your senses are sort of really heightened, and all I remember is Lively going, "I've got the young bloke," sort of thing. Like, back then, but it was good then. I just sort of got the ball and sort of had winger in, so it's just caught the ball, passed the ball, sort of eased my way into it. But that was my first memory. I can't remember much else of the game. I know we got beat, but that moment to get on an actual NRL was really really exciting. But like I said, the first thing I remember is getting on, and was I saying, I've got that young bloke. So
It's a great memory to take with you, man. That's so cool.
Yeah.
So good. So fast forward a little bit, 1992, massive year for the Steelers, kicking off the season with a preseason challenge victory over the Brisbane Broncos, no less. So how important were those preseason comps, especially that season for you guys? Like, I think that's to this day the only piece of silverware the Steelers have won, like a championship.
Well, at a first grade level, yeah, it is. I think that was really exciting, and obviously for us being a young side, those pre-seasons games were really beneficial for us because easing into the season, obviously it helped get a little bit more experience. Obviously for myself in 1992, I'd sort of had sort of 2 years in and out of our first grade side at that point. It was good for us, obviously, as a side because it helped get us a bit of cohesion, and we'd had a few new players join the team, particularly in the forwards. So, because most of the guys that were coming through were young guys, were backs like myself and Dave Riella, Ryan Girdler. Mary had come in because he's a little bit older. Mary had come in. Brett Robble was still only, he was 2 years older than myself. So, we still had a really young side, and we had a few, Craig Izzard, Dave Gallagher, Steve Waddell, those guys that had come into the club. That pre-season sort of competition was really, really good for us. So because then it gave us a bit more opportunity to sort of get some games under our belt together. I think in that sort of pre-season challenge, what was it, 2-week challenge, what it was back then. I had my brother coming through as well, and a couple other guys that were the same age that they could sit on the bench, and a lot of the clubs do the same thing. It just gave them an opportunity to blood some of the younger players in those sort of first grade level, but not first grade competition. So when they actually do use them for NRL, it sort of gave them a bit of a taste. As hopefully it's not as daunting, and they know whether they can sort of or potentially manage that step up. So that was sort
Yep.
of why I think that was really good. And obviously when we obviously won that, and it was great for the Wollongong region or region. It's great for us as a collective side
Yep.
to achieve something. Yeah, for the club.
Absolutely. So, as you said, your brother Craig came into the side that year. Like, just how special is it to have your brother playing alongside you in first grade? You know, living your dreams together. Like, that's the stuff dreams are made of, man.
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, obviously you do obviously when Craig, well, you get to that level, you sort of think, and you know your brother's coming through behind you, and he's obviously following the same pathways that you have. Um,
Yep.
you sort of think, oh yeah, be good if he does get that opportunity. Um, and he did. Like, so not probably wasn't a permanent fixture probably till a year or so later. But getting that odd game here and there when there was injuries and other things as well, that certainly helped. And that year as well, one of my sort of heroes growing up was Mick Neal, obviously because I was a Balmain supporter, and those
Yep.
years 88, 89, all those years he was the 5'8". He came to the club as well, so
Oh,
uh,
wow.
that was sort of really really good for us as a squad as well, having that someone that had that experience
Yes.
in final football in big games. That sort of helped us come through.
Absolutely. Now, I have to mention one of my great friends that I've met through doing this podcast, one of the Kiwis legends, Aaron Whitaker. He came through to the club in 1992. What are your memories of him first? And second, how hard did he make you work to hold your spot in the side?
My memories of Aaron, I do remember him and his wife Andrea. I do remember them coming. We got on really well. He's a great bloke, to be honest. Like,
Yeah, man.
um, on some level, you sort of think, oh, we're vying for the same position. You sort of, would you, sort of, no, don't try and find reasons to not like someone. But but realistically, you're in a club environment, and I think how could you not like Aaron? He's such a great bloke. Um,
The coolest guy.
in saying that too,
Yeah.
obviously knowing, having had a couple of years there, and it was sort of like, and I was still sort of 19 at the time, and Aaron's come to the club. Knowing a halfback is sort of like, oh, okay, well, in the back of your mind, you're going, I'm going to train hard. I've got to, work this little bit harder because that first grade, that halfback spot's mine. That's mine. I don't want to lose it, sort of thing. So,
Yep.
um, so knowing he was there, it's sort of, it's sort of unfortunate for Aaron because obviously a lot of other clubs that if he went to, he probably would have been playing NRL. So, um, and for myself, in '92, even though overall in the year was probably a bit hot and cold, obviously because I ended up making my Origin debut and
Yep.
country Origin, all that sort of stuff as well that year, and then also towards the back end had sometimes time in reserve grade. It was sort of on one hand frustrating, but also uh, knowing that guys like Aaron were behind you, pushing you through. Uh, it was sort of like, oh, you want to try and make sure that you're playing your best all the time and doing the right thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, you said you made your city country debut that year. What's it like picking up that first rep jersey, and being a shot to play State of Origin? So young.
Yeah, well, at the time, I think Ricky Stewart was injured. So, fortunately for myself, that sort of provided an opportunity for me to play country Origin. And we ended up winning. It was the first time that country Origin had ever beaten city Origin. So,
Really? I didn't know that.
yeah, so, and I played reasonably well, I thought. There's obviously when the critic was of your own game, you said, "Oh, I could have played better on this spot there." But being part of the side that was the first time the country Origin won, was really exciting. And because I played well, Ricky Stewart was still injured when come Origin time. So for the game, the first game, uh, and I got called in the camp to train whilst they were unsure around whether Ricky Stewart was going to play, and so that was, again, so to go from where you are to be in Origin camp was like, really exciting. Fortunate enough too, Wishy was there, Rob Wishart, and
Right.
Mary was making his debut. It was his first game as well, I think.
Oh, wow.
Come that Saturday before the game, Gus Gould, who was coach at the time, sort of pulled me aside and said, "Johnny, you're in. You're going to play. Sticky's not going to make it." So
Wow.
so that
Freak
was sort
out.
of like, so all of a sudden, just from being in camp, you sort of, I knew then sort of that, okay, you sort of switch modes mentally. So okay,
Okay.
well, okay, you're playing, so you sort of go, okay, this is what we want to do, and and fortunate enough, a lot of the guys that were in the side, John Cartwright, Glenn Lazarus, Benny Elias was hooker.
Wow.
I think it was like 5 debutants, and I was one of them. I think myself, Mary, I think Graham Mackay,
Yep.
I think Chief, it was his Origin debut,
Hurry out.
and Robbie McCormack. He was on the bench
Right.
as well, so from Newcastle.
Stacked.
So it was really exciting. It was just, like I said, going from, just training with the squad, even to be there was like, really exciting. But then obviously knowing you're going to play your first game
Yeah.
in a few days' time, it was sort of unbelievable
Trent.
on some level.
I bet, man. So what's it like to run out, for New South Wales at the Sydney Football Stadium? There's 40,000 screaming fans behind you. You're playing some of the biggest names in rugby league. Like the 90s was an unbelievable era for Origin, crazy good players. What's that feeling like, man? Like, is that just like crazy good?
Oh, it was, yeah. So I mean, I was fortunate enough that my first game was in Sydney, so
You're lucky.
going to face a home crowd rather than a Queensland crowd was always beneficial for me. But yeah, it was just the atmosphere. You just sort of, it's a different game. Obviously, having played the few finals games that I played, you just it's a different level. The atmosphere, you're looking up, particularly in Sydney, you're looking, and there's sky blue everywhere.
Yeah.
You're going out there, and just all of the fanfare that, obviously before that, you only ever sort of seen games on TV, really. To know what the atmosphere is like, it's like, it was awesome. So
I bet, man. So how did the game go? Like, how fast was it on the pitch? When you've got the likes of Mal Meninga running it, Alan Langer, Kevin Walters, they're so stacked, the Maroons in that era. You actually got the win too, as well, beating Queensland 40-6, I believe.
yes, we did. It was a really tough game. I think these days, off the back of that game, I think we'd probably have about 4 players suspended, and
Okay.
and they'd probably have about 2 or 3 as well. But back then it was a little different rugby league. It was very physical. Uh, I think, and so much faster. It was just, I think there was one stage there, um, and I can vaguely remember Mary making a break. We were just sort of, we were just all gassed. I think the whole 26 of us that were on the field were just all struggling for air, and a pass just got passed out the back and just fell on the ground, and Mary's picked it up, ended up making a break, and
Yeah.
just sort of, you're trying to breathe, and I remember trying to support him, and at the end of it, you're sort of like, just trying to get your breath back. You're still trying to get your breath back, but you're pushing yourself to try and support your mate who's made a break. And,
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, it is. It's, I mean, it's another level football. So I've never played anything else like it, in regards to intensity. It was really, really exciting. And the thing was, too, obviously we got the win. Um,
Yeah.
you know,
Special.
we um, and it was a tough win too, because we ended up losing Brad Clyde in the first. I think um, I think we lost him in about the first 10 minutes. He scored a try in the corner early in the game, and I think then, or not long after, he did his ankle, and then we lost Laurie Daly he
Oh,
got knocked out. So obviously it's my first game. 19 years old, and trying to steer a side around, and to get the win was really. So I think they moved Freddie from centre to 5'8", and
right.
unfortunately enough, obviously same age as Freddie, we played juniors against each other when we won Harold Matts and SG
Yeah.
Ball. We actually played Penrith in the final against
Oh,
Freddie.
wow. Oh, how good. You got one over him.
Obviously we know how great a player Freddie was, and
It's
back at
amazing.
that time, I think we did really well. The guys that came on the forwards, certainly did their job. Essentially, I had a really good game kicking wise. I think that sort of helped.
Okay.
General play wise, I think I don't think I look back and go, oh, yeah, that's not my greatest game, but for us to win and me do the job and help the team in the way that I did, which essentially what I was probably at that time was my probably greatest attribute. Was my
Yeah.
kicking game and that sort of stuff, and my defence. That helped. I think a lot of people remember that game because that's when Benny Elias was on the field with blood coming out everywhere and
Yeah.
with his mum and everything. I think that's the folklore from that game, really. So,
That's origin, man.
it really it was once you experience it, something you sort of oh yeah, I want to experience that again. So.
Absolutely. So another massive part of 1992, the Steelers make their first ever finals campaign. You took on the mighty St. George, first round of the playoffs. You got the 1816 victory, and the Steelers are going through to the next round. So how special was it, playing in the Steelers' first ever final series? And what were the feelings coming out of that match, going on to play the Broncos in the next round?
I think from a town perspective, like they were just the town was buzzing. It was just they were just so excited. Obviously, there was a lot of Steelers supporters. They were coming out of the works, and even probably the guys that the locals that weren't Steelers supporters, once their sides were out of the finals race, they jumped on board too. I think.
Everyone loved the Steelers.
It was great. It was to be part of that. I mean, probably for myself personally, I hadn't had the best build up. I obviously got injured early in the year and sort of with the groins and like as I mentioned earlier, I just spent some time in reserve grade. I wasn't really playing my best football as we come into the finals. So, but to get that opportunity to be part of the squad, playing 5'8", I sort of moved back to 5'8", and Megsy McNeil, he moved into halfback. That was certainly it was an exciting thing to be part of. I think, looking back at that, it was sort of it was great because obviously, in our side that we were so young. Obviously, myself, Dave Riolo, Johnny Cross, Mary was, even though he was sort of that little bit older, 23, 24. Brett Robble, but 22. So, all those sort of guys. It was really great for us to sort of experience at a young age, and probably on some level, moving forward, we probably half sort of as a group expected to probably that would come around again. But it didn't really that next year, and we sort of around it, but we just weren't quite enough to get over the line to get back into those finals football.
Yeah, she's a tough old comp, the Winfield Cup, man. You got to be on your game every week. It's super tough, eh? So you went down to the Broncos, unfortunately, but you had another opportunity to take the Dragons on again to get into the grand final. And one of the great low-scoring games of all time that could have gone your way. A few dubious calls from the ref potentially that cost you a grand final berth. Tell us about that semi-final.
Well, again, I think it was there was 4-0, I think, in the end. And I remember that sort of their try. Wayne Collins had ducked down a short side and give the ball to the Panther and scored in the corner. And Ricky Walford's the Panther. So, but yeah, so he scored in the corner, and it was such a close tussle game. I think we had 5 tries disallowed, I think, and to be fair, I think 2 of them were legitimate to be disallowed. But I think probably 2, if not 3, should have been awarded. So I think there's still most of the Illawarra region, and in the back of my mind, I think there was a conspiracy for at least one Sydney team to be in the grand final, because the Broncos already made it. So
that's right.
I think from a advertising perspective, Sydney versus Brisbane, I think that's what they wanted secretly. And
You're not salty at all.
no, I'm not. No.
Oh, I love it. Funny. The Broncos ended up blitzing them in the grand final anyway, so never mind.
Yes,
So
still
coming back to
disappointed not to get there. That's a big thing.
Yeah, man, it would have been amazing to see the Steelers win a grand final. Like I think everybody loved the Illawarra Steelers. Like even if that wasn't your number one team, everyone just loves Illawarra Steelers. Like you ask anybody.
I think it might be because we had the best theme song. So
You did too. It was a little beauty. It was a beauty, very catchy. So, coming back to State of Origin just for a bit, you played the 1997 ARL series, playing all 3 games, and you slotted the winning field goal in game 2, which won you guys the series. How incredible was that moment?
Well, yeah, sort of. I didn't realise that at that time. Obviously, that kicking that field goal was the first time that someone had kicked the winning field goal to win a series. So I remember I read a story probably about 4 or 5 years ago, I think, where someone mentioned it. And, I think I got rung up about it, or there was an article in the paper about it, and I was, okay, I didn't know that. And, sort of. But at the time, I remember I think the scores were tied at the time, and there was about 10 or 12 minutes to go, and got the ball. I was about 30 out, about 10 in from touch, and I thought, I'll have a shot, and I hit it really well, just nailed it, and went straight over the dot, and put us ahead. I just thought, well, if we get ahead now, then we can, obviously try put a bit of pressure on them, and at worst, if we don't we aren't able to score any more points, well, then we're ahead. We just need to obviously defend them and make sure that they don't get any. Which, fortunately enough, they did. They didn't.
Yeah.
They had an opportunity, I think, right near full time to kick a penalty goal from about 44 out, which fortunately they missed. But
yeah, man.
But it was really exciting. Obviously at the time, the late Tommy Rodonigas was coach, and having won the first game in Brisbane was really good. It was a good thing for us as a side, because game 2 was in Melbourne. So we thought if we can get win game 1, well then, even though we're in neutral territory down in Melbourne, at least then we can then potentially always be in the box seat to try and win the series if you win game 1. So fortunately, we won game 1. We got down there, and and we were fortunate enough to win that game as well. And obviously, as we said, won the series. Also, funnily enough, down there, that's where the cattle dog first came in. So there was talk down there, and we sort of got together, and Tommy's like, these guys, in his voice, we're not going to take any crap, and if they want to put any crap, we're just going to, you hear the word cattle dog, it's just on, everyone on, we're just going to punch the crap out of them, sort of thing. And we obviously coming up with what was the name of it, what it was, and we said, we can't just say whatever it was, I can't remember. And then I think Jimmy Dimmick's come and said, why don't we just call it cattle dog? Because Tommy was always talking about cattle dog and this and that. And sort of as a bit of a G up, Jimmy said, we'll call it cattle dog. And Tommy loved it. Yeah, beauty. So that was sort of
Has a good ring to it.
And it was meant to happen in game 2. Never happened. Obviously, it happened in game 3. And, obviously, Jimmy Goddard, that's infamous for Jimmy Goddard, putting Joey on his ass. So, but yeah, that's sort of where that came about. It was really funny actually. So
Yeah, so good.
particularly in that environment, and then all of a sudden, when it happened, and and all the other stories that go with it, obviously the folklore that since then that where'd cattle come from, all that sort of stuff. That sort of, but I do remember that's where it sort of first initiated.
It's so cool. I love the Tommy Raudonikis stories too. Like, what was it like? Because you didn't have him as your club coach, but coming into Origin camp, what's Tommy like around the boys? Like, 'cause he's rough as guts, but that's why we love him.
Well, I think like and I think of these other guys Tommy himself was, he was the first one to say he wasn't the most skilled halfback or whatever it is, and he got everywhere he got because of hard work and determination
Yeah,
and toughness, and that was him, and that's what he brought and expected from his sides as a coach. And um, in that environment, in Origin, you've got obviously the best players in the competition and the skilled players in the competition. You probably don't need to be as technical as you might want to be for your club. So he was great, and he was also coach for Country Origin as well. So had a
right.
little bit of experience with Tommy there, but it was just a really great environment to be in. You know, and obviously just the passion, because Tommy was just blew through and through. Just
He was.
that, and just you wanted to go out there. You just want to do your best and play well, and obviously for many other reasons. But being with Tommy as your coach, and the legend that he was, you didn't want to let him down either.
Absolutely, man. So, just jumping back a bit, 1995, the Super League War breaks out, and there's contracts and money flying around everywhere. And you ended up at the Sydney Roosters the following season. So, was this a direct result of the Super League War, or what was the reason you moved clubs?
Well, short answer for that is no. It wasn't because of the Super League.
Okay,
Probably if Super League had sort of come in a little bit earlier, I probably would never have gone to the Roosters. So, to be fair, and um, in 1994, I'd had a really good year. Um, Personally, won the Player of the Year for the Steelers
yeah,
uh, in that year, and then obviously uh, that was my final year in my contract in 1995. Um,
right,
so negotiations have sort of started, and um, I wanted to desperately. I was desperate to sort of stay at Illawarra. I was Illawarra junior. Mum and dad lived at Dapto and Coonawarra, and I was at that time. I was living in Wollongong, and um, I wanted to stay. There's no doubt about it. And but then I had two offers. I had an offer from Parramatta, which was a really good offer,
yeah,
uh, and I had another really good offer from the Roosters. And um, at that time, obviously Parramatta's money was a little bit more
right,
because the Super League hadn't come out yet. The Super League sort of war hadn't come out then by that time, and sort of all off season heading into '95, start of '95. We're negotiating with the club, and had these two other offers, which were a lot more financially beneficial for myself, and
yes,
uh, but I said I still really wanted to stay, and I said to the Steelers, if you come within 50 grand of what they're offering, less than what I'll sign right on the spot, and they
right,
still hadn't come to the party, and uh,
right,
and it got to the point, and I just said, oh look, I'm going to have to. The start of the season, we hadn't started the year all that well. I think we lost round one, um, 25-24 against West at Campbelltown. Um,
all right.
you know, and then round two, we ended up beating the Warriors. We played the Warriors in round two down in Wollongong, and
Oh, you thrashed them as
so,
well.
and then we sort of had a few other tough games, and I think we lost from memory, and so. But for myself, I was actually playing reasonably well. So I think in round one I scored 3 tries. In round two I scored,
All right.
I think, 1 or 2 tries, and um, and played well. just because I
Yeah.
scored tries doesn't mean I was playing good. But yeah, I was sort of thought, well, I want to make this decision, my mind up now, and obviously was having meetings with, and I was really honest with the club, and look, without telling them exactly what I'd been offered. I said, well, you're going to have to come up. Like you get, and I said, if you get within 50 grand, I'll sign here on the spot. And
Right.
obviously, a few other meetings with a few other boys, Johnny Cross, and uh, who else? I think Dave. Some of the guys that was been a big part of the side. Um, we want you to stay. Mary, we want you to stay. Sort of thing. And I said, well, I want to stay, but there's this factor. Like so.
Yeah.
In the end, I just sort of said, "Oh, look," and then I'll sign. I end up signing with the Roosters. They weren't quite at the same level of money that Parramatta offered, but it was still well above what Illawarra had offered me.
Okay.
And at that time too, obviously in the negotiation, I knew that Freddie had signed there, and
Right.
they signed a few other boys. So that sort of swayed my decision to. I thought going to there. They actually physically were showing that they wanted to head in the right direction. So I thought,
Okay.
yeah, I'll go there. And yeah, that's how. And then probably a week and a half, or not even that. Even I reckon that's when I think the Super League war sort of broke out. So
Okay.
that ultimately sort of took the focus away from me actually leaving the club. So um, and I remember the actual meeting that we had in Wollongong at the Continental Baths in Wollongong there with Lachlan Murdoch and John Rebo come down
Yeah.
and whatnot, to come and talk about what their vision was for Super League and everything, and I went to that meeting myself, and a lot of other boys, because we wanted to go, and obviously had a discussion with Muzza, who he'd had conversations with them around that. He hadn't actually committed to it or anything like that.
Okay.
My belief, from what he told me, and then, but he sort of said, "Well, here's an opportunity potentially for you to maybe stay." And so I obviously went to that meeting and that sort of stuff. And if that had come around a week earlier or whatnot, I probably quite well have could have signed with Super League, which would obviously to stay in Wollongong. That would have been the only reason why I would have stayed in Wollongong, because I had signed with Super League. The money that they were offering was equivalent to what I was going to be getting leaving the club.
Okay.
So, but obviously, as we know, it didn't happen. But that's
Yeah.
sort of how it all sort of came about, and
Okay.
it helped sort of fly under the radar in regards to having to leave the club to go to the Roosters. So,
Yeah.
no,
Illawarra Junior
my
jumping
decision.
ship.
So,
Yeah. So, how did you find the transition to the Roosters? As you said, they had some pretty big names, and you had Andrew Walkers, Sean Garlick, Terry Hermanson, one of my favourites, Brad Fittler,
rock,
like a
yeah.
terrific roster. How did all that transition for you?
I think, to be fair, it probably wasn't the greatest transition from because at that time I'd had a spur on my heel and I was injured, so I
Okay.
didn't really have the best off season. Um, so obviously coming to that club, and in '95 as well, Adrian Lambert he sort of launched himself, on the
Yeah.
NRL to the player that he was. He had a good year. Obviously played for Queensland, and they won the series 3-0. So he'd obviously, when I signed, he's Adrian Lamb. So when I
Yeah.
initially signed, there was that factor as well, and obviously I went there and I was still injured,
Right.
and sort of having that didn't help my transition, and so I started off the year and probably on the bench,
Yeah.
because I think that the game sort of changed then, and you could carry people, fresh reserves on the bench, and
Right.
And that was how I sort of got my opportunities. When I got on there, obviously I felt as though I was contributing well, I was playing well.
Right.
But but Adrian Lamb was playing well too. So that sort of didn't help the transition either. But obviously, initially being injured, that didn't help.
No, for sure. But what's it like being a half playing behind two massive Kiwis and Terry Hermanson and Jason Lowry? It doesn't get much better than that having those two big rocks in front of you.
Yeah, well, it was really good. I mean, that started the club, obviously the Roosters. I think we won the first 12 or 13 games. I think it was. So
Wow, so good.
it was something along those lines, and um, and obviously the team was really functioning well. Obviously, like I said, I was on the bench, so um, when the side's winning, well, it's obviously harder to force yourself into a winning side. So there was
Sure.
that factor. Like I said, all I could do was when I was getting my game time is to try and play the best football I could, and I felt as though that I was, and but at the same time too, you still having you still want to play, you want to start. So there was that factor as well, but
Yep.
obviously, the Rock and Jace Lowry and who else they had. Well, Luke Rickerson was at lock, and
Oh wow.
he was such a great player as well. So in the back rows, I think Darren Ramikar, he was coming through. A
Yep.
few other guys as well. So
Did you have
uh,
Scott Goulet and David Barnhill that year?
uh, don't
Or
think
was that a
so.
bit
No, I think
earlier?
they were after
Might have
me.
been a bit earlier or after. Right.
I think they were after myself because I
Okay.
remember talk that Scott Goulet was going to go there, but he hadn't. So I think they were
Okay.
still at Saints at that time. So
Right. Oh mate, what a gun team you had though. So you only stayed there for the one season, and then it's announced you've signed on with Parramatta. So was it a case of like sort of being stuck down the pecking order, and it was time to look for a fresh opportunity?
definitely, yeah,
Right.
really. So like probably halfway through that season at the Roosters, I sort of wasn't happy with not playing a lot of football. And there was a few games there where Adrian Lamb got injured, and I played, and I think we won. I played most of the game. We won 20-0 against Western, and we beat South, I think 62-0. And
Wow, what a hammering.
and I started at halfback in the South game, but obviously come off the bench and played, I think 74 minutes or 75 minutes or whatever it is, or something around
Yep.
that base of the whole game against Western. We won 20-0, and I felt as though I played well, and then we won. The next week we win 62-0. I thought potentially, I would then start the next week, and obviously
Yep.
because Lammy had been injured, but it didn't happen that way, and I probably
Okay.
got my nose a little bit out of joint,
Yeah,
to be
fair
fair.
enough.
Um, and obviously come on and played, and then I think about 2 weeks or so later, we played the Warriors, and Lammy had a blinder, and I think
Yep.
I got about 5 minutes for the whole game.
Okay.
Lammy had a blinder, and uh, and then that sort of after that, I just said, "Oh, because I could still sit on the bench." I said, "Oh, I just want to go back and play footy."
Yep.
Went back to reserve grade, and then after probably a couple of weeks uh, of that, the opportunity to talk to goes, "Do you want to go to Parramatta?" And um, if if you could get a release, and my manager Steve Gillis at the time sort of started off talks with the Roosters, and
Right.
they were happy to let me go.
Okay.
Um, you know, it, so basically we progressed further with going to Parramatta, which obviously in the end I did.
Okay. So were they the only club interested, or was there any other opportunities elsewhere? Because this was for the ARL, like Super League split year to transition over to Para.
Yeah, I think that was probably the only sort of serious sort of place. I
Okay.
know there was a little bit of talk about potentially going back to Illawarra, um, but at the same time too, I think it was just sort of whispers. It wasn't really anything legitimate around that.
Mm.
So um, yeah, it was. Uh, because obviously I was contracted for 3 years at the Roosters, so
Right.
realistically, you're not going to be sort of talking about, I do want to leave club. So um, at that time, obviously Parramatta was still rebuilding. Obviously the boys from Canterbury had come across as well that year,
Yes,
and
yes,
obviously
the big
and
four. Yep.
and Gary Freeman, New Zealand legend.
Yeah, man.
He was sort of finishing up. He was at Parramatta at the time, and he was looking at finishing up. So that sort of opportunity was sort of like, well, okay, well, would you be interested in going to Parramatta? I know you didn't go there last year, but would you be still interested? So, and obviously, rest is history. I said, well, yes, and sort of
Yeah.
went forward and ended up signing.
You did indeed. You absolutely came alive in 1997. You really took Parramatta by storm. You finished third on the ladder. You scored 6 tries. You kicked 25 goals, 7 field goals, and you actually kicked 3 in 1 game, from what I found out. That's crazy. Who does that? You remember
Yeah,
that?
definitely a rarity, but yeah, it was Friday night game at Brookvale, and I think we ended up winning
Yep,
17-10 or something
that's the
along
one.
those
Nailed it.
lines. And um, well, I think what happened was I kicked one field goal to get us ahead I think by 7, and I think they scored or something along those lines. And then or something happened, and we're only ahead by 5. So I kicked another field goal to sort
Right.
of get us ahead by 6, and then I thought, well, okay, well, down here the opportunity came again, and kicked another field goal, so to get us ahead by 7. So that was then obviously the end up the final score, but. That sort of I said that's was just spur of the moment type thing. So you sort of
Yeah.
opportunistic was there.
Yep.
Obviously, the timing in the game, where the game's poised at the time. Yeah, okay, I'll do that. So
That's brilliant, man. Did you ever have feelings of thinking back to your childhood? Like you go down the park, you're kicking goals, you're kicking field goals all afternoon. I mean, that's what I did as a kid. Did you ever have one of those moments as a child where you're like, oh, I'm going to kick a winning field goal in a big match one day, and then fast forward, you actually did?
oh no, I think for the most part, those sort of moments, it's more scoring the try.
Oh,
So
really?
I
Okay.
don't think obviously, when you're a kid, you score on the win and try to win the grand final or whatever that game may be. I think, but obviously being a kicker, um, and I goal kicked all through juniors. Um,
Yep.
you sort of think sometimes, oh, you want to kick the winning goal or that sort
Yeah,
of thing.
man.
And
From the sideline.
uh, I don't think field goal you sort of comes to the forefront of your mind. Usually the try scoring and
Right.
or goal kicking, they're the main ones. Um, but definitely because if that's all I did, well, that might be something that I would have thought about
Yeah.
more often than not.
I love a clutch field goal. Like you look back to say 2015 when Jonathan Thurston kicked that winning field goal for the Cowboys, in extra time. Like for me, that's just like holy moly. And then he had the opportunity to win it, with the sideline conversion, on the buzzer, but missed. Hits the post, man. Doesn't get more drama than that.
No, that's right.
Crazy.
So definitely a magical moment in NRL history for JT. That's for sure.
Yeah, man. Oh, mate, it's just the best. Absolutely the best. So, unfortunately for Parramatta, you guys went out in straight sets in the finals, but you must have taken a lot away from that season. You kind of put yourself back on the map and Parramatta all in one go in '97, would you say?
I think so. From a club's perspective, obviously we didn't achieve our goal. Obviously, was to win the comp, but um, it was the first time they played finals for several years. Um, obviously, personally, I felt as though I had a reasonable year. Obviously, was fortunate enough to win a few awards off the back of that, and uh, heading into the next season, we'll sort of, whilst we're disappointed that we didn't get the result, we were sort of going into next season. We thought, it's definitely something to build on.
Yeah, for sure. You guys had an amazing season, 1998. Um, it's one of the years where, because I was only young then, I would have been like, 98, I would have been 14. So, I'd watched quite a bit of league at that point, but that was when the name John Simon rang through me because I was a Brisbane Broncos fan before the Warriors came around, and I was still supporting the Broncos. And guess who beat the Broncos twice thanks to John Simon playing out of his skin? It was Parramatta. You were the bogey side that year.
Yeah, well, probably across, well, particularly early back in those days, the early days, Parramatta were one of the bogey sides like,
Yeah,
for the Broncos because I remember several times, I know even when early 90s when Parramatta weren't as strong, I think they sort of beat Para several times over that period, even though they weren't that strong. And,
yeah,
um, so obviously coming into that, there's always sort of helps build your confidence if they sort of have a,
yeah,
a bogey side against the Broncos. Um, but even for myself, how could you not get yourself up to play the Broncos? Obviously,
no,
with the stars that they've always had, plenty of stars playing for their side. Um, they won the Super League comp in 1997.
correct.
So but and even obviously coming through, when I was back in the Steelers days, etc. You playing against Alfie and Kevin Wilder, those sort of guys, you
Yeah,
always sort of build yourself up for those games because they're the best players in the game. So you want to play well.
yeah.
You still want to beat them. So for myself, that was the same. Just like everybody else. You get yourself up for those big games, but and particularly the Broncos.
Yeah, man. Well, you did that in the finals. I think the score was 15-10 off the top of my head. I think you kicked another bloody field goal. And yeah, you put yourselves through to I think you went through the semi final after that match.
Yeah, I think so. And then and that next go, obviously, that was the game that you sort of they split. Of course, we won that game. We went on to the other side, and
Right.
it was sort of I forget how it wasn't exactly how the finals were now, but I think there was a lot of similarity. Um,
Yep.
but yeah, so we ended up having the week off, so by winning that game, and then the next game is probably the game we don't really want to
Yeah,
talk
yeah.
about.
But we're going
That
to. We're
Bulldogs
talking
game.
about
They're talking about clutch field goals. That's where I would have loved to at least kick one, but
it.
fortunately I didn't. And as we all know, it's very
Well,
infamous that game.
yes, the Great Escape. I had Paul Carriage on the show, so don't feel bad. He had to talk about his match. He was the champion bloke, mate. I love chatting to him about it. He
Yeah,
was really
action.
good.
Yeah,
But yeah, talk about 10 minutes where you can't stop momentum. Like, what are the feelings for you out there when the Bulldogs are they came from 18-2 behind to tie it up basically on the buzzer, and then Craig
yeah.
Palomount just misses a 50-meter field goal, like by an inch.
Well, yeah, that's like I said. It was all about momentum. I think they had a bit of momentum. I think um, they scored a try with about 7 minutes to go, and I actually got taken off, and then
Oh, really?
they ended up scoring again to tie the game up, and then I ended within that 3 or 4 minutes they'd come from like 10 behind or whatever it was to to level, and I got put back on, and um, obviously I think I had a shot at field goal, and Steve Price charged it down or whatever it was. So
Oh,
um,
he's the legend of doing that.
yeah, he was such, such a great person at
Yeah,
applying kick
man.
pressure and that sort of stuff. But yeah, but I think that's from memory. That's what happened, and like I said, we got obviously that last 10 seconds of the game. I sort of remember it was like picking the ball up and action kicking the ball, and then I actually thought we'd lost as well, like obviously with the field goal, and
Yep.
um, we were all showed, but obviously they checked it, and obviously it went under. But again, I think we just didn't have that momentum. We couldn't wrestle it back, unfortunately. So
Yeah, just what were you thinking? Like Willie Talal scored, and they were two behind, and there's pretty much a minute left on the clock. Darryl Hilligan's lining up that conversion from as far wide as you can possibly go. What's going through your mind? You're just praying that he misses, and then it bloody goes over. You know?
Yeah, pretty much, because I think they scored in a very similar position shortly
Yes.
before that, and he missed the goal. So um, obviously, we were hoping that he'd miss it again, but
Yeah.
the kicker as great as Darren Halligan, he made the necessary adjustment and
Yeah.
slotted it. And like I said, the rest
I'll
is
never
history,
forget that.
unfortunately, for me.
I'll never forget that. So I know you're on the losing side, but it's one of my favorite games of all time. Just because watching it live, it was exhilarating. It was crazy. That's what you want to see in a finals match. And not being a supporter of either club, it was just a great spectacle for me. It was just, I was waiting for the grand final for the Broncos. Yeah.
It's definitely a
Oh,
game to remember for a lot of Bulldog supporters. Not too
yeah.
much for Parramatta supporters, unfortunately.
No. Troy, if you're watching, I do apologize. I know you hate this game. So, 1999, a year of two halves, some might say for you. You started out the year with Parramatta, but I think you were injured from what I found in my research. And that led you to sort of missing a lot of the start of the year. And then you finally got on the field about round 13 or so. And then it's overs at Parramatta for Johnny Simon and he's off to New Zealand. So if you can explain that whole journey and getting to New Zealand, how did that all come about?
Well, after that '98 game, I pretty much got called into the office, and Smithy had told me that I wasn't going to be part of the top squad for 1999. So
Really?
yes,
Why?
so
That's crazy.
um, I just um, that's the decision that he made, and went okay. Well, I didn't agree with it, obviously, and um, because obviously during 1998, Ricky Rice Smith wanted to try and sign Ricky Stewart at to Parramatta,
Okay.
and but to do that, he wanted to move me on, and I think I think one offer was with at the time Adelaide
Okay.
were in the competition, and I said, well, no, I don't want to go there, and I sort of said, well, if you want me to go, I said, look, pay me out, and I'll go do my best. I still felt, I think I was only 27 at the time.
Yep.
Um, I still felt as though that I had 26 at the time. I had plenty of time to play. I
Absolutely.
still believed in myself as a player, and obviously off the back of uh, obviously 1998, obviously disappointed heading into 1999. I thought, well, okay, well, we'll move forward, and obviously got called in. That's so. Whilst I was injured, I did injure my quad in the preseason doing kicking. So I basically missed most of the preseason.
Right.
Um, I essentially knew that I wasn't really wanted. So,
That's
um,
crazy.
at that time, um, because of being a bigger bloke, playing in the halves, I'd have to go train at 6 o'clock in the morning before the quad. I was in sort of essentially fat squad, for example. I'd have to
Okay.
train at 6 o'clock in the morning, then start training with the guys at 8 o'clock and whatnot. And then for the most part, I was actually on the bench for reserve grade. So,
So
um,
even worse. Oh my God, you poor fella.
so, um, that I sort of I knew the, the predicament, but I just sort of went, well, as I said, I was still confident in my ability and everything, I, but also well, sort of stood my ground, even though and then uh, the Warriors played Parramatta at Parramatta, and then I was living at Oatlands at the time, and uh, I didn't play. So off the back of that, I think a day or two later, Trevor McEwen, who was the CEO at the time,
Yes.
um, he'd called my manager and he came to my house and sort of talked about a possible move to the Warriors,
Okay.
and obviously we talked about it. I had a bit of a think about it. I went, well yeah, I will. And for that, obviously, because Stacey had been, he was still quite young in his career as well, and
Oh yeah,
but we were
the
he
gun.
was still a great player. For me to obviously go there and be there as a 5'8",
Yep.
which was sort of my originating position coming into grade. I thought, well, that's a really good opportunity. Obviously, I knew the talent that was in the side as well, even though I think at the time they weren't travelling too well.
No, they weren't.
I thought, well, one to give me an opportunity again, and two, I think it was a good opportunity for me to help. I think I could contribute, and we sort of had that meeting, and had a few days grace in between us. I had a bit of a thing. I said, well, yeah, let's do it, and then
Yeah.
And we agreed, like, sort of come to terms, but then the clubs had to sort it all out, and
Right.
because I was still contracted to Parramatta for 1999 and 2000. So
Okay.
And then obviously they sorted out, and I actually said to my manager, I said, I reckon by the time we play the Warriors, because they played the Warriors again in about 5 weeks' time. I said,
Right.
I reckon I'll play first grade against the Warriors on that date when they play the Warriors next, and I actually did. So
Yeah.
I had probably 1 or 2 games in reserve grade prior to that, but then I was part of the first grade squad for the game against the Warriors, and funnily enough, that was my last game for Parramatta, because the next game, that's when they went, yep, we agreed to let him go, and that was my last game for Parramatta was against the Warriors. So then next game I played for the Warriors. I think they had the bye that week after that. So after that game, obviously I came back home I was living in Australia at the time, obviously, and then I moved during that week. We got back, and I told the guys that I'm going to the Warriors, and I'll be leaving. So basically went. So yeah, so that a lot of people didn't really realise that. Yeah, my last game for Parramatta was against the Warriors, and then the next game.
Cool.
Yeah, so my first game for the Warriors was after that. So.
Right. Was there ever a moment when all the discussions came up, with Trevor McEwen, where you're like, the Warriors? Where did that come from? Like a lot of Aussies don't necessarily want to come over and play for the Warriors, let's be honest. So, was it like a real, like, out of the box kind of decision?
Well, obviously before that, it hadn't been an option. Like, I hadn't thought about it at all. And then Steve Gillis, Chimes, as we called him, we still call him, sort of said, well, he sort of talked about it. And I went, so like I said, I had a bit of a thing. I said, oh, it could be an opportunity there. But I said, I knew, obviously, the guys like Stacey and some of the other, obviously Nigel Vunganar and Joe Vunganar and Logan Swan and Jerry Sisu, those guys were coming through. They were sort of quite new in their careers. So
as well, somewhere around. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was not. I thought, well, there's an opportunity there, and obviously, being at that time, obviously, I've been playing for 7 or 8 years by that stage, and you're sort of moving into the back end of your career, and I just thought, well, there's a good opportunity for me. So I knew that I wouldn't have to play. I wasn't going to be playing halfback. Obviously, Stacey was the halfback, and and I thought, well, there's an opportunity for me to play with a really good halfback. I'm in 5'8", just do my job. Stacey does his job, and away we go. And that's how that seemed very attractive to me. And like I said before, I said, well, that I agreed, and we, obviously they went about it, and then, like I said, the last game, I said that game I played first, it come true, and then after that they let me go. So we finished off the year at the Warriors, and we finished the year really strong that year, so that was really good.
Did indeed. And I'm going to let you in on a secret, and all the listeners. It was you coming to the Warriors and getting on that roll where you absolutely smashed everybody that made me jump ship from the Broncos as a fan and finally support the Warriors, because I am a Kiwi, but I'm half Australian. My dad's from Brisbane, hence the Broncos. And it was actually you coming to the Warriors and absolutely playing out of your skin, I might add. That 42-0 win over Newcastle in the wet, I was sold. I was like, yep, I'm going to do it. Year 2000, I'm going to start supporting the Warriors as a fan. And yeah, I supported them with my heart and soul for many a year after, you know. So
Yeah,
yeah, cheers.
that's still one of my favourite games, actually.
Yeah,
Um,
man, that was
obviously
crazy.
because the atmosphere when we did win that game was great. It was also Stacey's 100th game, so that was
Yes.
uh, to play like we did in that game, for such a milestone for a legend like Stacey. It was really really pleasing, and obviously too because I only got there. I think after the first game, I got made captain. So
Yep.
um, after one game, going from the bench for reserve grade to actually captaining an NRL side in one season, and then for the good thing for me was actually as you said, we finished the year really strong, and that was um, something that was really positive uh,
Yeah,
for
man.
us heading
Yeah.
into the next year. So
Yeah, it was unreal. You guys actually destroyed Western Suburbs Magpies in their final ever game. Something like 66-12 or 10. Like you absolutely
yeah, I
destroyed
think it
them.
was like 62-10, I think, from memory. So,
Yeah,
um,
crazy.
but yeah, so
Pretty
it
awesome.
was really it was. Uh, I remember Mark Ryan. I know you've had him on here
Yeah,
before, a legend.
yeah, man.
He was our coach, and I just remember, we just not let up. Obviously, we knew that they weren't going well. We knew it was going to be potentially their last game.
Yeah,
Um, we wanted to play. We've played so well. For the back end of that year, he didn't want us to let ourselves down by sort of easing off because it's the last game of the year, and we did so accordingly, which was really pleasing. Like I said, to finish up the year the way we did, that was really really pleasing.
yeah, man. It's extra special for me to have you on the podcast purely for that reason. Where, I'll never forget. I was actually in my bedroom because back then, I was only young. I was in my bedroom. I heard it on the radio that you'd signed with the Warriors. And then I watched the news that night and it came up that you were coming to the Warriors. And I was so excited. I was like, oh my God. And now I'm talking to you. So it's pretty special, actually. It really is.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Great childhood memory of mine. So, yeah, man. Moving on to year 2000. So I've got my brand new Warriors jersey. I'm supporting the club, and you've signed an Ivan Cleary, and there's some good players come to the club, and everyone's expecting big things, but it kind of didn't go to plan. It was a pretty tough
Well,
year.
definitely did not. I think at the end of '99, I think New Zealand played. I think it was Samoa in a because they had the World Cup. I think,
It
or
was
something. Or was at back end of that year,
Tonga.
and breaking his arm really badly, and
Yeah,
uh, so that sort of put him out for pretty much all of the off season, and he missed the first few games of the season, and so that sort of put a bit of a dampener on our pre-season. Uh, but that being said, we played Melbourne, who just won the comp in round
yeah,
one, and we ended up beating them in round one. So
we did.
we thought, oh yeah, we're really a chance, uh, and I sort of we were going well, even though obviously we were still missing a few players. Obviously, Stacey definitely. Um,
Yep.
I thought we would a chance of probably even starting off the year a lot better than we did, and as you said, it definitely didn't go to plan. I think uh, of those first few games, we ended up not winning. I think we won the first game, but we didn't win not many in the first next three or four, and
Yeah.
including we got beaten by the Broncos pretty badly. Um,
Yeah, do you know that was the very first NRL match I ever went to because it was my old club versus the new club I was following, and I begged my parents to take me to a game, and that was my first ever game, so I wanted to come watch you guys. It was so cool. Even though you lost, round three, 2000, I went. Yeah, it was great. Yeah,
Yeah, because we also played. I think we played Newcastle, and I think we were up 8-4 with about 2 minutes
yeah.
to go, and unfortunately, young Ben Lythe
In
come
line.
down
I
short
know
for
what
the
you're
kick,
gonna
and
say.
Billy Payton charged it down and ended up scoring, and uh,
You had a
that's
draw.
Yeah, so it ended up being a draw. Well, lucky enough,
Yep.
I think Joey missed the goal. So,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, I was gutted.
really sort of disappointed that we had a draw, but also on the other hand, happy that we didn't lose in that way.
Yes.
Um, I know I probably didn't react that great at the end of that game because obviously heading into that set before Benny, because Ben was replacing Stacey at the time,
Yep.
and he was doing a really good job too. Um, and then I thought, yeah, I'm in control mode. I had to set that set control and move to that position. And to be fair, Ben was in a real good position to kick the ball. He was on a shorter side, uh, down, to kick down that side where I was going to kick anyway. Um, it just happened so that Bill Peden had other ideas and
Yeah.
ended up charging it down. So,
Gutted.
um, but yeah, like I said, it was because we played so well. It was a really tight game. It was wet again. I think after Newcastle played us their previous when we won 42-0, obviously they were up for that game as well. They didn't want to get beaten like that again. And
Absolutely.
we played really well and worked really hard to be up 8-4. And obviously the game ended the way it did. It was, like I said, it was really disappointing for everyone. But um, you know, it just sort of typified that start of the year. Sort of
Yeah.
for us. So. Um, sort of, and it probably wasn't just the start of it; it just typified the whole year. So I
Yeah,
know.
well, you lost Ivan as early as well. Like big signing coming in, and he was basically gone for the season.
Yeah, well, I think he had nerve damage in his shoulder from memory, and scoring a try against Penrith. So I think um, when we played against them, uh, Penrith in Penrith, um, I put a rubber kick in for him, and he in scoring that try, that's how he injured his shoulder
Okay.
because there was a big collision when he dove for the ball, put his body on the line, so to speak, and that was the outcome for him. So, but yeah, obviously that didn't work out for us as well. I think we sort of having him in that back line would have been a really good steady influence. But in saying that, that sort of provided a lot of opportunity for guys like Paul Whatuira and Shante
Yes.
Harpy, those sort of
Oh,
guys
mate.
who were really young coming
Yeah.
through. That provided an opportunity for them to sort of to get some game time. Um,
Yes.
so uh, it wasn't all bad, but I mean, from a results perspective for us, we were definitely disappointed around how we went. And then obviously
Yeah.
I ended up in, I think 6 weeks. I broke my thumb, and
Yep.
uh, I played a couple of weeks with it, and then I think we played the last game I played with it. We I got a needle, and I sort of stood up and got really lightheaded, so I did not warm up that game, and
Oh,
uh,
wow.
yeah, but it went out and played. But then went and saw the specialist during the week, and he sort of said, "Oh, look, if you keep playing, that because how I broke my thumb, I actually split it along the bone. So
Okay.
rather
Oh,
than breaking it, I split it in the joint, and it was moving out the bone. I was actually splitting my bone like that. So
yeah.
he sort of actually said, well, if we don't get to it soon, it could have more permanent damage. So uh, so uh, that year, so actually on my birthday,
Oh,
actually
mate,
on my
that's bad
birthday, I
luck.
spent my 28th birthday in hospital getting my thumb fixed. So, um, but yeah, but I needed it done. So I ended up missing, I think, 6 weeks off the back of that. That again, that didn't help the side any. Stacey had not long got back, and confidence wise, he still wasn't 100%
Right.
because of such a major break in his arm. Um, for him to get back to where he needed to get to, it was something major. But yeah, like I said, obviously losing Ivan, lots of other things. It just wasn't our year, unfortunately. And
No.
uh, again, we
Yeah.
finished the year off pretty well, but we were definitely out of finals contention, unfortunately.
Yeah, man. Interesting, Mark Graham, when I asked him about that final year he coached the Warriors, he alluded to you and Stacey, saying that the games you two actually played together, there was only about six of them for the whole year, because he had his first choice halves pairing. You won them.
Yeah,
And so, like, that was a big part of, the side always disrupted with, either one of you being out of the side. But then when you did play together, you guys were great.
Yeah, and it was I really loved playing with Stacey. It just made my job a lot easier. We were sort of contrasting styles and I think that's probably what worked
Yep.
for our side, and obviously even for myself. Having someone there a little bit different, as a
Okay.
partner, it just made it a whole lot easier. I think Stacey sort of, with the way I like to play at that stage of my career, Stacey was quite happy to let me do that, and that's what I was more comfortable with. Where
Okay.
Stacey, we know what a great runner of the football he was.
Oh,
He could really sort
amazing.
of concentrate on that. I could take care of the, obviously the kicking. That was a big part of my game.
Yep.
That sort of helped. And I said I love playing with Stacey, and actually love playing with all the guys. I really love my time over in Auckland. It's sort of
Yeah.
outside of being the Steelers, but obviously it's my hometown, and it was definitely my favourite years of my career.
Really, that's awesome to know. Because it's actually interesting because a lot of the Aussie boys I get on here that have come to the Warriors, I think a lot of people don't necessarily expect to love it as much as they do until they get here and get amongst the culture and the brothers, and then you leave like lifelong friends. It's like really special.
Yeah, well, obviously being Indigenous Aboriginal, I sort of got adopted when I went over there because we played well as well. I think I was sort
Yeah,
of on many levels. I was made an honorary Maori, so um,
nice.
so that sort of helped as well. That sort of obviously helped with my experience
Yep,
at the Warriors. And obviously for the most part, those games we did have a lot of success when we were able to get our full side on the paddock.
yes,
Again, obviously the back end of 2000 was sort of like, well, we were looking for bigger and better things for 2001 as a group,
yep,
but obviously didn't end up that way because obviously
yeah.
at the time we ended up pulling out, and there's lots of conjecture around whether the Warriors were going to still be a club and things like that.
Yeah. So what was your journey through all that? Did you have a contract originally for 2001?
I did, yes. I had an option, and probably halfway through that year, uh, Hugh McGahn, who was our football manager, operations manager, whatever at the time with the club,
Yeah.
um, he sort of come up and said, "Oh, we want to take up that option," and I said I was more than happy for that. And, yep, beauty, So, um, but then obviously around that time that they pulled out, it sort of made most contracts sort of
Yeah.
void, and
Yep.
uh, and obviously then the renegotiations just started, and um, and at that time too, a lot of the guys, we stopped getting paid,
All
so
right.
there was that pressure as well, and a lot of I remember sort of having all the boys sort of got together, had a meeting like let's stick together sort of thing, and uh, obviously because we'd finished the year well, we wanted to sort of move forward as a group. They ended up, uh, some of the boys ended up signing, which is you know they needed to, they had to, so.
Yep.
Um, and I sort of was one of the last ones to sort of get spoken to. And by that time, Daniel Anderson had been appointed coach, and
Okay.
um, obviously with my time, he was a lower grades coach at Parramatta when I was at Parramatta. Uh,
Yep.
I sort of had an inkling that I wasn't going to get picked up again, and that's exactly what happened. So, um,
Okay.
so then at that time, there was a few sort of different offers. I could have gone to England, which I sort of circumstances I knocked back. I really wanted to go, and obviously with no options being over here. So I sort of temporarily retired, and then um, after a few months, I ended up asked if I want to go to the Tigers. So I ended up signing with the Tigers, sort of
Okay.
probably around just before Christmas, I think it was. So.
Okay. So you rock up to West Tigers. You've got yourself a club for 2001. What were the feelings coming in to that? Because they were a very new side as well. Had only been around for one season at that point. What were your thoughts going into that season?
Well, I sort of missed half an off season. Really, I didn't get there till I think early January. So, and even to be fair, like I sort of half retired till probably early December. Then that's when I sort of knew, oh, yep, the Tigers were on the table. So obviously I started training again, but
Yep. Stay away from the bakery job.
but it was still, I mean, it still wasn't the same level of trainer that probably I should have been doing, but I was training as hard as I could. But yeah, so I got there, was sort of, like I said, a relatively new club. They just obviously merged. Two sides had merged, I think, a year or so earlier, and sort of like how where was I going to play, sort of to obviously try to fit in, all that sort of stuff. And it ended up started off sort of at sort of lock, sort of off the bench type thing, and then sort of finished up at 5'8". And but yeah, at the same time too, there was a lot of turmoil in the club at that year.
Yeah.
Obviously, Craig Field and Cam McGuinness got suspended for testing positive to drugs. Obviously, John Hopewadi, everyone remembers that.
Oh yeah, for Glenn Morrison. Yep, got a colonoscopy.
That's that incident. So there was that, but also in the club, the guys were great. But there was also a lot of sort of turmoil within the club around, because Terry Lamb was a new head coach as well, and
yes, he was.
and and obviously with his sort of the late Terry Hill, it was very vocal around the training methods that we were doing at the time. He didn't really agree with it, obviously, because he'd come off his career with Manly, where they'd been successful and obviously won a comp and played the final series all the time, and got to that point, and then and they were sort of at heads. It was just sort of, it didn't make it fully enjoyable. And I was living down here at the time and traveling up each day. It just sort of got, in the end, sort of made it. I wasn't enjoying my football, and I just sort of, I think by around 18 or 19 or whatever it was, I sort of said, well, no, I'm done. I don't feel like playing anymore. I just sort of woke up one morning and went, no, I don't feel like playing anymore. So
around just like that. Did
yeah,
you
and
feel like
I only just turned 29, so I was just like, yeah.
Did you feel like you had some sort of unfinished business kind of with the Warriors, the way it all ended? Because you'd sounded pretty positive about your time at the Warriors. Do you think maybe if that Tainui, all of that didn't fall over, maybe 2001 would have been a lot brighter?
Oh, well, for me personally, yeah, it would have been. I mean, obviously, the Warriors went well that year. Obviously, Daniel Anderson was a good coach. So, um, so that it was disappointing not to be part of that. And obviously, they made the grand final the year after. So, I definitely felt as though I had plenty to offer. I said I was really disappointed that I didn't get picked up or re-signed. But like it's not the first disappointment in my life, and not the last one either. So you just get on with it. You just okay, well, it's like, it's definitely not something you don't want, but you just got to get on with it. You can't sort of just start sort of begging and pleading. Oh yeah, why? Just say okay. Well, it is what it is.
It is. So you decide that morning, right, I'm done with footy. I'm hanging up the boots. So how do you adapt to going back to what people would call a normal life, Monday to Friday, find yourself a job? Like, how does John Simon adapt to a different kind of lifestyle?
Well, for me, it was just, like I said, well, the last game I actually played, we got beat, I think 64-0 by Melbourne in Melbourne. So,
that hurts. Not a
and
good
I
way to
remember
sign off.
it was a Thursday night, and I actually left home to play that game here in Kiama Downs at about 4:45 in the morning to go play that game in Melbourne. So, we had to get to the airport by a certain time, and for me to get there, I had to leave here at sort of 5 o'clock at worst. And did that. We flew down. Obviously, We had a really young side that game. I remember. I think that was myself at 5'8" that game. Obviously, whatever games I played, 200 something. Joel Kane's experience back in that backline.
Oh,
Um,
really?
he played around 50 games, I think, because I think he was coming off the back of the season where he got the highest point scorer.
Oh,
So
yes.
he was
Yep.
around 50 games. But the other 5 starting backs, I think, combined, they'd had about, I think, 13 or 14 games between them. So
Oh,
I
you got
think
more.
I think there was 1 or 2 debutants and a few other boys that had played 3 or 4 games each. So it was a really young side. Add that onto, I wasn't really enjoying my footy. I'd gotten up at 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
That morning to go and play that game to go get beat 64-0. Um,
Oh,
yeah, and to be fair, I mean, I didn't play that well, obviously either that game. And I just sort of, we came home the next day and whatnot, and I actually um, had been into the Dragons game. They played whoever, because my brother was playing with the Dragons that year. Uh, I've been in the Dragons game in there and sort of went and watched the game and obviously watch him and support him, and uh, sort of got to the point, sort of got to the point when we were training that Sunday morning. I sort of woke up and went, I don't really want to do this anymore. So,
yeah.
I travelled up and let the boys know, let Cherryland know I was retiring. So, like,
Just like that.
yeah. So, yeah, it's probably not the way you want to. No one wants to go out, but at the same time
Yeah.
too, I just sort of went, well, no, that's it. So, um,
Crazy.
sort
So,
of, and to be good too. I think the boys sort of finished off the year really well. Like, they had a couple of young guys come through in the halves, and
okay.
uh, they played, like Ben Jeffrey and
Oh,
they
yes.
come in and played in that role, and they played really well to finish the year. I think they didn't win every game, but they won a handful of games that they weren't expected to win, and finished the year really well, which was really, really good.
Really awesome, man. So what a career. Yeah, just one of the great careers, man. It's almost a shame it finished the way it did, though. Like, because because you've been up there and played in some pretty amazing games. State of Origin, Illawarra Steelers in the finals. Oh, we all miss the Steelers. They were good times. you know.
Yeah,
So
I still love the Steelers. It's um, well, fun enough. Obviously, these days everyone does. Well, I do super coach with all my mates, that sort of stuff, and
yeah, me
you've
too.
got to put in what team you support. There's no Steelers, so I put in the Warriors. So, um,
Oh, nice.
because there's no Steelers, I still follow the Dragons. Obviously, that's sort of because they're sort of technically the local club now, but there's no
Not the same.
Steelers as such. So
No.
everything's Warriors these days. So
Oh, that's cool. I was going to ask you, so I always finish off with a few fun questions. I was going to ask, what is the club you support? So, up the wires, is it for
I've
John
answered
Simon?
that. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so who do you think's going to win the NRL in 2024?
Oh, look, I think it's going to be hard to go past Penrith again. Uh,
Yeah, that's so good, eh?
Realistically, obviously um, Ivan's got them going, great guns, like, and has been for probably 5 years now. So, they're definitely the team to beat. Um, the Broncos are obviously with a few changes to their lineup. They're still developing. I know they
Yep,
got beaten last week, um, but they're still sort of working out their combinations. I think they're another side that can definitely come up. And Cronulla have been playing well. I think they've sort of. Uh, I know again they got beaten pretty comfortably last week, but
yeah,
I know Fitzy that he'll get a switch back on.
yep,
They'd had off the back a lot of tough games. I mean, every
yeah,
game's tough, but they'd had a lot of tough games, which they'd sort of uh, played really well and won. They're on top of the ladder for a reason.
yeah.
Uh,
Only
come
fewer
final
loss.
time. Yeah, come final time, I think that they'll. There's still many games to go, but they'll be there. They'll be one of the teams, and probably the Roosters.
Yeah.
I think
Simmering away
they're
nicely.
building. You know,
Yeah,
they're building really nicely. Obviously, yeah, they've had a few additions to their squad, and obviously Spencer Linu, he's obviously
yeah,
went missing, for suspension for those all those weeks, and they were still able to keep their
yeah.
momentum going, and he only adds to their forward pack. So they've got a lot of
No,
guys coming through, and guys like Angus Crichton who haven't had their best time, particularly last year. He's come back to really good form, and
he is
uh,
back.
you know
Absolutely.
those guys, they've just sort of been, sort of doing their job and winning the games how they should. They've
Yeah,
Joey Marnie, he is a great player. He just
yeah,
adds that another dimension to their back line. Obviously James
yeah,
Tedesco is great, but I think uh, Joey Marnie adds so much dimension to their back line.
yeah.
He's predominantly on the right side, but he gets the float around the field as well, and he's so dangerous. So that he adds that X factor to them as well.
100%, man. All right, so completely unleague related. What is your favorite TV show or series of all time?
Oh, TV shows. Oh, I would probably Brooklyn Nine-Nine or Seinfeld.
Oh, yes.
Probably those two. They were
Oh,
really
everyone
enjoyed
loves
those.
Seinfeld. Everyone
Yeah,
loves
Seinfeld
Seinfeld,
probably
eh?
from older, but obviously more recently, definitely Brooklyn Nine-Nine. It's sort of my
Okay, all right.
sense of humour, and uh, really sort of enjoyed that.
Fair enough, too. All right, last question, man. If you could eat one meal for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Uh, Oh, that's a hard question, really. I get really well looked after by my wife over here. So, and if I request the same thing all the time, she sort of gets cranky at me, saying, "No, eat something else." So, yeah, oh, geez, I don't know. That's a hard question. So, schnitzel with chips and gravy, or chicken parmigiana with chips. That's probably my two
Beautiful.
go-tos, really.
Oh,
Whenever I go out to the bistro, that's usually the thing I order. So, uh,
brilliant.
let's say
Brilliant.
that.
I'm at the moment, like since I moved to Christchurch a year and a half ago, we've got this pub down the road called the Rock Pool, and they do these sticky barbecue ribs with curly fries, a coleslaw, and a beer for $25, and I just can't stop ordering it. It's so good.
It's always good to have a go-to. So
Yeah,
if
man.
that's your go-to, that sounds like it's definitely worth it.
Absolutely. Yeah, man. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the Point of Difference Rugby League podcast and going back in the day with me. It's been an absolute privilege to meet you finally and yeah, go through the career. It's been awesome, man.
Yeah, well, if I'm actually going to Warriors Old Boys. I think who they're playing. I think it's against the Broncos. I think at the
Nice.
end of this, well, we're still about 4 weeks' time. I think so.
Okay.
Um, so I don't know if you're going to make your way up there. I hope I'll see you actually meet in person. But actually heading over. I haven't been over for a couple of years, so I'm really looking forward to it. I haven't seen a few of the boys since I was last over there. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you for having me on the show, Dave. I hope I haven't bored people too much. I like to think
Absolutely
I
not.
live in my own little bubble down here, so I sort of think I am quite boring. But
Not at
yeah,
all.
thank you for having me on there. And you know, Daisy, Tony Delasera said, "Oh, look, you'll love it, you'll love it." And I have really enjoyed it. So
Oh, good man.
yeah,
Oh,
thank
mate,
you.
thanks, Daisy, for helping me out on that one. Getting Johnny on the show. So good, so good. All right, man. Again, thank you, and thank you to everyone for listening on Spotify, watching on the old YouTube, and if you're not on the Point of Difference Rugby League Facebook group, make sure you get on. John Simon's in there, along with many other great names of our wonderful sport, rugby league. But until next time, we're out of here, and we'll see you next time for kickoff.
Full time.